In 1965, 6 teenage boys stole a boat. They weren't criminals. They were just bored, restless kids at a boarding school in Tonga. They wanted adventure. They had absolutely no idea what was coming. One night, they slipped out of their dormitory, snuck down to the harbor, untied a fishing boat that didn't belong to them, and sailed off into the Pacific Ocean. 6 boys, ages 13 to 18. No permission, no real plan, no experience sailing open water. Just the moon, the waves, and the feeling that anything was possible. Then the storm hit. Not a light rain, not choppy water. A full, ferocious Pacific storm. Waves swallowed the boat whole. The mast snapped, the hull cracked, and 6 terrified boys held on for their lives in the middle of nowhere. When the storm passed, they were still alive, but completely lost. No food, no fresh water, no compass, just open ocean in every direction. They drifted for 8 days. 8 days under the Pacific sun with nothing to drink. Most people don't survive 3 days without water. These boys survived 8. On the 8th day, one of the boys saw something. A shape on the horizon. Dark, jagged, impossible to be sure of. But it was there. They paddled with their bare hands toward it. And they washed ashore on a remote, uninhabited island called ʻAta. An island so isolated that no one had lived there in over a century. Let's be clear about what they had. The clothes on their backs. A few scraps of wood from the wrecked boat, some wire. That was it. No tools, no food, no shelter, no way to call for help. Right there on that beach, they made a decision. They were going to do this properly. No chaos, no fighting, no every man for himself. They created rules. They divided up jobs and rotated them so nobody got stuck with the worst chores forever. 6 teenagers, stranded on a deserted island, and they built a democracy. Then they got to work. They built a shelter from palm fronds. They hollowed out tree trunks to collect rainwater. They planted a garden, bananas and beans from seeds they found on the island. They caught feral chickens that had been roaming wild for decades. They hunted seabirds. They fashioned fishhooks from wire and caught fish with their bare hands. In a few weeks, these boys who had never lived off the land in their lives were feeding themselves every single day. But surviving wasn't enough for them. They wanted to actually live. So they built a gym out of bamboo and rope and worked out every day. They sang together. They prayed together. And one boy, using driftwood, a coconut shell, and salvaged steel wire, built a guitar. An actual, playable guitar. At night, they sat around the fire and made music. They weren't there for a week. They weren't there for a month. They were there for 15 months. 15 months of waking up on that island every single morning. 15 months of feeding themselves, maintaining their shelter. Keeping each other healthy, keeping each other sane. Back home in Tonga, their families had held funerals for them. They were officially dead, but they were very much alive. Every single day, they kept a fire burning on the highest point of the island, not for warmth, not for cooking, as a signal, just in case. They never stopped believing someone might come, even after 6 months, even after a year. Every morning, they climbed that ridge and they fed that fire. In September 1966, an Australian sea captain named Peter Warner was sailing past ʻAta Island. He knew the island was uninhabited, and had been for over 100 years. But he spotted something through his binoculars. A burned patch on the hillside, fresh, recent, and smoke. He turned his boat toward the island to investigate. What happened next, Warner would describe for the rest of his life. 6 figures came sprinting out of the jungle, screaming, waving, jumping, crying. They dove into the water and swam toward his boat. 15 months on a desert island, and they were in better physical shape than most people who'd never left home. Warner pulled them aboard and stared at them. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. When the boat pulled into port in Tonga, the families waiting on that dock had already grieved these boys, had already accepted they were gone. And then they weren't gone. They were right there, walking off a boat, alive. Well, together. But the story wasn't over yet. Because back in Tonga, someone remembered the boat they stole. 6 boys who had just survived 15 months alone in the Pacific were arrested the moment they stepped ashore, charged with theft. The owner of the fishing boat pressed charges. The same boys the world was calling miraculous were sitting in a jail cell. But Peter Warner didn't walk away. He went to the boat owner. He paid off the debt himself. And just like that, the boys walked free. But Warner wasn't done. He had a new lobster fishing boat, and he needed a crew. So he hired all 6 of them, every single one. And he named the boat ʻAta, after the island that had kept them alive.